now in the hot seat to discuss all of that. Mike Wood, thank you very much for your time. I want to start with the comments from the Archbishop of Canterbury there, Justin Welby. He's branded the government's plans to send asylum seekers from the UK to Rwanda as the opposite of the nature of God, which is a pretty damning assessment, and on Easter Day of all days. My personal view is that the Archbishop of Canterbury certainly shouldn't be political on Easter Day of all days, but there we are. What did you make of that?
I think that they were unwise comments. I think that the proposals that the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary unveiled this week are aimed actually at helping to reduce the number of people risking their lives at sea, while still offering people who are fleeing persecution a safe place free from persecution whilst their claims are assessed. It helps to tackle evil people smuggling gangs. It helps to reduce the tragic losses at sea that we've had. It's worked well in Australia. We've heard from the Australian ambassador how successful their scheme was. And I think this is a sensible and proportionate measure to make sure that people who need asylum can actually get the protection they need whilst their applications are considered, without actually acting as a draw for people to be paying people to smuggle them across Europe and then risking their lives on craft and boats that can barely float.
I don't know if you spend as much time on the cesspit, also known as twitter.com, as I do, but what I've seen, interestingly, is a lot of sneering and sniping about Rwanda in particular. Are you interested in the fact that all of a sudden it's, okay to sneer at Rwanda when actually, Rwanda seem to be doing quite well at the moment?
I think that some of the responses we've had on Twitter, other social media, but also parts of the mainstream media, really verge on imperialism and the kind of racism that many of those people would take pride in attacking if they came from a government minister or for a presenter on your channel.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the Home Secretary was reported to have had to issue a rare ministerial direction to push through these plans, meaning that she takes the ultimate responsibility for it. I bet your constituents are telling you, I assume, that actually they're quite happy with the proposals and they're, not excited, but they're somewhat, give it their reluctant support, I would imagine, that finally something has been done about this, because it's felt like Britain is just completely powerless as far as the crisis in the English Channel is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the channel crossings, those small boats crossing the channel, it's been consistently one of the top issues that I've received emails and letters about over the past few years. People want action to be taken. They want effective action to be taken. And actually, they do think that this is proportionate. And if anything, people's main complaint is it should have happened sooner. And that's why the Home Secretary's had to issue that ministerial direction, because people don't want to spend the next 2 years whilst people draw up the right projections. And we've seen how accurate a lot of the projections that come from government advisors can be over the past 2 or 3 years. People want actions now, so Pretty's absolutely right to issue this direction. Of course, the Home Secretary takes personal responsibility for the success or failure of this. It's a key part of our manifesto that we have to deliver. And so as a government, we all take personal responsibility for making sure that this succeeds.
What do you say to those, though, that perhaps accuse Brexit Britain of becoming Little Britain? Because the former International Development Secretary and the current MP for Sutton Coldfield, Andrew Mitchell, called it impractical, immoral and incredibly expensive. Now, this at a time when he, I believe, was also critical of cuts to the foreign aid budget. Is he getting Britain wrong?
I think that's a completely wrong reading of the situation. Obviously, what we've seen with the new plan for immigration is a much fairer and in many ways generous immigration policy that treats people from around the world equally, regardless of the country they're from, which region of the world they're from, the colour of their skin, instead of favouring overwhelmingly white people coming to the UK from Western Europe on free movement. We've got an immigration policy that's now been in force for 18 months that actually considers people on the basis of what they can bring to our country, what they can add to our economy, to our society, to our culture, to our people. And that's got to be a better way of doing it. That's the opposite of small Britain. That's the kind of global Britain that I campaigned for in the EU referendum. And I want to see us continue to deliver that.
Mike, earlier in the show, we heard from the Just Stop Oil spokesperson, Dr. Graham Buss, and Birmingham was one of the areas targeted this week. What did you make of the protests? Are the police being too soft here? Because I imagine, again, that's another gripe of some of your constituents. Because it strikes me, Mike Wood, that as long as you're championing woke causes, you can actually get away with criminality in Britain.
I think it looks like that too often in a lot of the country. I don't think anybody believes that whether it was an anti-lockdown protest or an anti-Brexit protest, the protesters would have been allowed to get away with half what we've seen with some of these protests here, but also in previous environmental protests and some of the social protests as well. People expect the police to enforce the law as it is. We've seen that happen in parts of the country. In North Warwickshire, we've seen hundreds of arrests. We've also seen the council take out an injunction to allow for the depot for lorries to move in and out of the depot. We've seen similar in Thurrock with many hundreds of arrests, but sadly, there are some police forces that are much less proactive, who seem less interested in enforcing the rule of law and allowing people to actually move about the country, carry on with their legal activities, than they are with the sensitivities of a woke campaign cause. And sadly, I think sometimes that seems to be the case in the West Midlands as well. And I think West Midlands police need to make sure that that where there are protests in Birmingham that are stopping this essential infrastructure, that they use their powers proportionately but effectively to make sure that people can go about their legal activities.
Robust remarks. I'm quite concerned, and I'm sure, again, your constituents are saying the same, which is that this is a country going above and beyond, world leading, in fact, as far as its reduction of carbon emissions is concerned. Do you wonder what actually these activists want? Because they keep saying they want to be listened to. Well, Mike, if you ask me, your party's government is going a little bit too far too fast, and actually the demands that they're making on the British public are in part responsible for the fact that we're all struggling with a cost of living crisis at the minute.
Look, I mean, clearly climate change is an important issue, but it has to be balanced with all the other important issues, such as you said, the cost of living, energy prices, transport prices, the impact that has on people's livelihoods. We have done better than almost any other country in the world over the past 30 years in terms of reducing our carbon emissions. The energy security strategy that was published last week shows how we're going to go further than that in terms of making sure that we have enough nuclear and renewable capacity to reduce our dependence on oil and other fossil fuels. So we are doing a huge amount. But everybody has a right to peaceful protest. What they don't have the right to do is substitute mob rule for the rule of law by using physical force to stop people doing their legal activity, doing their jobs, carrying out, whether it's going to work, whether it's, stopping ambulances being blocked, crossing, going to hospital, stopping printing presses working. That's why I think the powers in the police and sentencing courts bill are actually needed, and they are proportionate to make sure that people can protest, but everybody else can actually go about their lawful activities without having to give in to the mob.
Well, Conservative MP Mike Wood, thank you very much for your time, and happy Easter as well.